All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today for this, what I think is a really important conversation. I'm sure y'all have seen lots of headlines of layoffs on tech companies and just question marks about the economy and the recession. Okay, all this stuff, right? So it's very, very gloom and doom and gloom, but there's a lot of hope, opportunity, and silver lining as well that comes that is actually out there right now. So I think it's a really great conversation for folks to be thinking about, is now still a great time to break into tech? We've got two wonderful alums from Codesmith who are going to talk about their experience, some of the ideas that they have, or some suggestions that they have about what you can be doing now before you even get into a program if you're considering one, and then some thoughts on how to stay present and relevant as things change within the industry. So to first introduce, I'm Jamaica Bryant. I'm the Director of Content and Community at Codesmith. And I'm currently, but right now I live in Pasadena, California. And I've been with Codesmith for a little bit over 2 years. So I will pass it to Leah and Qwen to introduce themselves.
Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by. My name's Leah Fox. I currently work at Mint Mobile, which is, it has a little green fox and Ryan Reynolds making jokes in a lot of our commercials. I'm currently acting as the lead on our Mint app team. And so we handle the account management for the phone plans that people are buying under Mint. I currently lead over 6 other engineers. I should say I did go to Codesmith. I think I was in cohort 4 or 5. I can't remember. Back when I was still in, where was it, Playa? I can't remember. But anyway, I also went through the program. And so I have a lot of great things to say about it. I'm not sure if we did this, but I'm happy to pass out my LinkedIn. So if any of you have questions about my experience with Codesmith after, please feel free. That's it for me.
That is awesome. I would love it if you could share with us just a little bit about the technologies that you might be using, or in the tech stacks or anything like that with what you're building with.
Absolutely. So we use React on the front end, which I know you all are probably familiar with. We use Node on the back end. Everything's in TypeScript. A lot of our SRE, so that's site reliability, a lot of that is built out in Go. Finally, for our apps, we are using Swift on iOS and Kotlin on Android.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Leah. Qwen, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. Super excited to talk to y'all. My name is Qwen Ballard. I'm currently based in Raleigh, North Carolina. I grew up in North Carolina and Wilson, if you know where that is. I saw somebody's from in North Carolina right now, Meredith. Shout out Meredith for being in North Carolina as well. I'm a software engineer at Smartcar. I actually just started a couple of months ago. I want to say the end of March. In Smartcar, what we do there, we essentially help build or we help enable mobility businesses to integrate their apps and services with connected cars. I guess to take it a little step further, to give you a good example. So we have a bunch of different use cases, but one good example that maybe will help you understand is, say an auto insurance company, right, needs to verify your mileage for whatever reason, so they can charge you or do whatever it is they need to from a business standpoint. There's a couple ways they can go about doing so, but one of the things they can do is actually use our connected flow and our API. And in doing so, you can give them permission to read certain metrics from your car so they can grab information. So again, a bunch of different use cases. Hopefully that helps paint a good picture of what we do. I'm actually on the experience team at Smartcar, and what we focus on is improving the developer experience for developers building applications and using our API and our platform. So, and I've recently been working on something we're actually going to release pretty soon. It's called brand management. So one of the things we've been working on or one of the things we've kind of heard from our customers is that when it comes to users kind of going through their flow to connect to their application, what ends up happening is they get a list of all these different car brands that they can select from. However, we've learned that for some services, they don't want to focus on all the different car brands. So they want to narrow it down and be very specific. So developers have been taking extra time to kind of build that functionality on their end. So we decided, hey, let's just give that to them out of the box. So we've created that new feature where now they can go in and for the different applications or products that they're building, they can decide, hey, what car brands would display and what you can see and use to connect to their services. And a similar tech stack to Leah, please correct me if I got that wrong. But we use React on the front end, we use Redux, everything's in TypeScript. On the back end, we use Node.js, and we use PostgreSQL for our database.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. Thank you for introducing yourselves and a bit of what you're working on, what you're building with code. I appreciate that. I think a lot of people here might be interested in your journeys into tech. So what are some of the things that you were considering when you wanted to break into tech? How did you decide on taking a boot camp and why Codesmith? And I'll throw it to Qwen first and then come to Leah.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Why tech? So I've always been interested in technology. Funny enough, I feel like going through school, being in college, my computer courses were always my funnest. However, I had no like computer science background. I have a degree in education, a master's in education, and I worked in higher ed prior to switching to being an engineer. I decided to break into tech because, again, I've always had an interest in it. One of the things that really got to me, though, is I think I didn't think I had the ability to do it. I think underrepresentation is like a real thing, especially when we're talking about brown and Black folks when it comes to these types of spaces. And not seeing that was something that really kind of hindered me and had me, I guess, stray away from trying it out. But I remember in grad school, I was helping a friend out that was actually going to school for this stuff to be an engineer. After dabbling in it, and once I realized, like, hey, if he's going to school and we can kind of help each other out, and I feel like I'm capable of doing this. So that really got me excited, got me interested. And then from there, it was trying to figure out what's the best way. So self-teaching myself for a little while, I think approximately 2 years, doing little things here and there. But I just kept hitting a plateau, and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm not where I want to be, and if this is something I really want to do, let me invest and and really take time and dedicate towards working towards this goal of becoming a software engineer. So that led me to looking and trying to figure out what boot camps are kind of out there, and I ended up coming across Codesmith. Wonderful resources, a lot of free resources, one of the best communities I've seen. All those things were one of the main reasons why I came to Codesmith.
I didn't ask him to say that, but it is true. Leah, if you could answer also.
Absolutely. So I actually started out in college in computer engineering. Coding was something I did in high school. I'd always loved science. But while I was in college, I realized I hadn't really given any voice to my creative side. So I actually switched to film. And so I worked in the film industry after graduating with a film degree for about 3 years. And during those 3 years, I found myself at first coding in my free time, and then coding more than I was actually working. And so I had to think about, okay, well, what does that mean for me? Like maybe creative is something that I love, but maybe it's not the right career for me. And so I started trying to figure out a way to reverse engineer, becoming an engineer essentially. And there were a lot of boot camps out there. And I remember finding Codesmith, specifically JavaScript, the hard parts. And so at this time I was going to meetups, popping into anything I could find just to learn more. But when I took that course, it taught me that I was somewhat on the right track. Like some of the things they were talking about were things that I had learned on my own. But B, it also showed me there was a lot to learn still, and that you needed to find a way to get that information. But C, and to Quinn's point, it gave me the confidence that it was something that I could do because I was able to be around other people, talk and ask questions about what they were talking about. And it made it stop seeming like, and when I say it, I mean the idea of becoming a software engineer as some lofty, unattainable goal. And yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you for that. So let's talk about kind of preparing for a successful career before starting an immersive, right? So we talked at the top of this, tech job market has seen a lot of changes in the past 6 months. That kind of change can cause instability or fear for career changers, right? Or folks who are looking to break into tech. So I'd love it if you could talk a bit about what aspects of the Codesmith community you found most useful on your journey. So you've spoken to a few of those. So if we could start with that, like how can prospective residents leverage networking or community engagement activities or mentorship programs inside or outside of Codesmith to enhance their success, enhance their chances of success breaking into tech?
So I would say there are a couple of things. One, the people that you're going through or will go through the program with, you're going to be spending a lot of time with. And although you might not become close with all of them, I almost guarantee it, you're going to become close with a few of them. And so when you leave, you might be thinking, I'm leaving friends, which is true, but also think that you're leaving peers in the industry. And so if you do stay connected with those people, and I would recommend staying connected with as many people as possible from Codesmith, because a large fraction of them will be engineers, which means you're already building out your network. But aside from staying in contact with them on a friendship level, ask them about the tech they're doing. Those are people that you can get little, do little litmus tests about where tech is moving by using them as resources. If you all are starting out new, ask them about their experience. What are their bosses like? Do they like working with them? Are there better environments out there than the one that you're in? All of these things. So I think my main what's the word I'm looking for? Suggestion would be to stay connected with as many people as you can, but also truly, and I don't mean this in a gross way, but truly every single person you meet at Codesmith, whether they're speakers, whether they're students, whether they're teachers, treat them as future resources in your mind starting now.
That's great advice. And I think even from the very, very beginning, right? So from workshops that the free resources that Qwen and Leah were talking about, but from the workshops that you go to, from, if you join the CSX Slack community, right? Like there's lots of opportunities to get to know people, and that knowledge and relationship building can happen from the very, very beginning all the way through your time at Codesmith and into your career. So that's awesome. Thank you. Qwen, how about for you? What do you think about how prospective residents can leverage kind of networking, community engagement, or mentorship programs to enhance their chances of breaking into tech?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say really just taking advantage of all the resources. I think one of the things I did was I started pinging a bunch of people randomly on LinkedIn, truthfully, just asking questions, seeing people that are software engineers, just kind of see what it is that they're doing, and really learning from them, and kind of just picking their brain. But outside of that, when it came to what Jamaica and Leah are both talking about, when it comes to building that networking community, I was in the Slack channels all the time. Every day I was talking to someone, I was asking questions, I was trying to pair program with people. I think for me, that was the biggest resource and the biggest gain I got from that. Being able to talk to people that have different strengths and different areas of improvement. You might come across some people where you can help them along the way. And that just solidifies what you know, and you're helping out, right? Giving back to the community. But on the other end of that as well, you might come across some people that might have more technical experience or might be better at certain areas than you. So being able to be in a community where no one's judging you, everyone has the same goal, is not competitive in the sense of like, I'm here, if I'm doing this, then that means you can't be. No, everyone's trying to pull each other up. And I think that's really important. I think finding those people, like Leah said, and really, again, just making sure you are consistent in communicating with them and getting to know them really goes a long way. There's definitely some people in my cohort. I was in the New York 20 cohort. There are some people I still talk to this day. And even at the Codesmith, like even to this day, we'll still have regular like meetups that we'll try to have maybe once or twice throughout the year, that one person in our Slack channel will kind of get it started, and we'll all kind of jump in and we'll try to figure out dates that work out for everybody. So really important to stay connected, really important to take advantage of that and kind of put yourself out there.
Awesome. I agree. There's a question in the chat about CSX. It was answered, but CSX is Codesmith's free learning platform. So it's an opportunity for you to get started building with code. And in addition to that, we have a Slack community where you can, as Leah and Qwen were saying, you can ask a lot of your questions, right? So you can get to know a bunch of folks who are also learning to code. And then if you have questions, there are certain channels within the Slack that you can ask those questions and help get answers. And as you get better and better, you'll be able to answer some questions too. This next one is for Leah. Were there specific organizations or communities you found helpful when you were at this stage of your journey, this kind of beginner looking to break into tech, thinking about it?
Absolutely. So towards the end, after Codesmith wrapped, I still was at Codesmith quite a bit. And that's a great time now that you're kind of off of the pressure of being in the boot camp environment. You can kind of just go back into more of the learning mode that usually people are in before they start a boot camp. But on top of that, there are countless resources outside of Codesmith as well. So, starting to go to local meetups. This wasn't a part of the question, but I see this a lot. So once you come out of the boot camp, or even now, really start referring to yourself and thinking of yourself as an engineer. And as an engineer, you should be talking with other engineers as much as possible. So wherever those are, I would suggest you should be there too. So yeah, a lot of meetups are really great for meeting people. On top of that, there are tons of communities for tons of different types of people. So for me, NSBE, National Society of Black Engineers, I was a member of for a while. There's Out in Tech that is LGBTQIA focused. And so whoever you are, there often are a lot of resources out there for you. You just have to look for them.
Great, thank you. We also at Codesmith partner with Lesbians Who Tech and Women Who Code. So there's a couple of other resources for you as well. Qwen, I'd love to know, so I have a background of higher ed as well. I worked at a business school for a while in the Career Management Center. One of the things that I saw there that was and I have an MBA, so I did that too. One of the things that I saw there that's really helpful is having either a target company or industry list. Did you have that prior to joining Codesmith, Qwen?
Yeah, for me, it's one of those things I wanted to, I guess I would say focus on the industry. I know that like you're told and it's encouraged to like maybe pick like companies that you're interested in and kind of think about and target. I focused on industries, and I think that kind of alleviated some of that pressure and anxiety around that. I think it also gave me a lot more of a, I guess, a broad range of things I can choose from. So whether it was sports, whether it was education, being that my background is in education, I really try to focus on things in those two fields. When you think about it, there's so many companies, there's so many things out there that you can do in those fields. And then from there, kind of narrowing it down to potential targets or companies that I will want to work for.
That's great. My team hears this all the time, but I really do think that there's an opportunity for folks, especially in a challenging market, to take their expertise add coding on top and be able to break into tech that way. So if you're somebody who, like Qwen, was in education before, there are likely some education or ed tech kind of either startups or companies who need engineers. And so being able to take your expertise and adding your ability to code on top of that is going to put you ahead of the game, and it's going to put you in a position that's better than others who are going for those same roles if they have the same kind of level of experience. So just something to kind of keep in mind in the back of your head.
If I can add on to that,
Please.
really quick. Yeah, my previous role prior to working at Smartcar was at an ed tech company. And one of the reasons that situation worked out, and one of the reasons when I was kind of interviewing and trying to get my foot in the door in that role and that opportunity, one of the things they said is like, we see you have an education background, you know, we're working with teachers, working with students, and because you have this expertise when it comes to building a product, you have a little bit more of insight compared to some other folks that might not necessarily have the same insight. Not that they can't do the job, but it's just, hopefully, you know, you can help bring and contribute to conversations in a more meaningful way.
Absolutely.
So to make this point, like it is really important and it's really impactful in your career in the long run.
So Leah, in light of this kind of more competitive market right now, I know that at Codesmith, we're working on even more opportunities for our community to build with code earlier on. There's some news coming out. I can't tell you today, but you'll hear more about it if you sign up for CSX or you're on our newsletters. You'll learn more about it coming up soon. But we are trying to give people opportunities to build with code earlier, right? So wanting to make sure that y'all have even more experience to be able to speak to on a resume in an interview once you're through the program. So Leah, the question for you is, for those planning to attend a coding school, how beneficial is it for folks to have personal coding projects or contribute to like open source products, which are projects that that the source code is there and you add to it?
Yes, it's super important. It actually is still important as you are in your career. You'll notice that a lot of the people that code outside of work tend to be great coders at work as well. But there's just so much that you learn from actually writing the code as opposed to reading about it or watching a video about it. A lot of the hardest bugs that you'll run into actually aren't algorithmic. It will be, how do I get this API to work? Or how do I authenticate myself properly when I'm using this? Or how do I set a project up from scratch again? Right. And so to make those things more like rote memory, the easiest way is practice, practice, practice. And that's what those side projects really give you. And if you are starting to work on those, something that was really hard for me was I was always trying to make like something huge or something brilliant, you know, that could solve problems, which is great. And you will be doing that in the future. You'll be doing it on your own. You'll be doing it at work. But for now, I would just focus on making something, going through the process from beginning to end. It could be anything. It could be something that shows the top 10 photos from Instagram. But like, is it a full application and can you run it, you know?
Such great advice. Such great advice. Thank you. Qwen, did you build anything personal project before entering the Immersive?
Yeah, one of the things I built, and funny enough, I went back and kind of redid it. Some of the things I built a sneaker wish list, really into sneakers. So I wanted to build a wish list that can hold that information for me. I'm really into Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I randomly found an API online that someone else built. I reached out to them and was like, hey, are you going to take this down? They said, no, I'm just going to leave it up for anybody that wants to use it. So I was like, thank you. And I went and I built like a wiki page for any character, nation, wherever you could think of, all things Avatar: The Last Airbender. Trying to think of, was there anything else? I think to Leah's point,
good project.
I think to Leah's point, it just getting started. I think the thing that hindered me or was a struggle for me was, again, like you said, you want to build something big, but also you want to build it the right way. And I think the thing in code is sometimes you don't know if you're building things the right way or not. But to that point, like just getting started and just building something and getting it to work, I think is really important. Because as you build, as you work, as you like test out things and try new things, you're going to learn like, hey, this makes more sense. Hey, this came back to bite me in the butt. Maybe I won't set it up this way again. And that's where you kind of get that learning and you kind of start to solidify some of those things long term.
Got it. Thank you. So I'll ask this of both of you. What advice would you give folks preparing for a boot camp on managing their time and setting realistic expectations in terms of pre-immersive prep? So studying, practicing, building. Any advice that you would give? I'll send that to Leah first and then Qwen, please.
So the first thing I would try to focus on is like what gravitates you towards coding. So for some people, it's building new things. For some people, it's exploring data. For me, it was algorithms. And so I really like banging out things on HackerRank, and I still do those problems today. But the reason why I mention that is because the biggest thing that you can do preparing yourself for the program is to code. And to code in a way that you're constantly expanding, you're always taking one step forward. And so I mentioned choosing something that you like because you should start to get comfortable in the uncomfortability of not knowing what you're doing, because that will continue forever. You'll get more confidence and you'll learn a lot more, but you're never going to know everything there is to know about software engineering. And so you're going to constantly be learning. And I think that's typically the hardest thing for people to get comfortable with is just being comfortable with not knowing. And the way you can do that is make sure you're doing things that you enjoy doing when you're going through the hard stuff, but also, give yourself some grace and just understand that this is kind of your new normal.
Excellent. Qwen, any advice?
Yeah, for me, I would say, and I kind of learned this once I got into the program. So telling people prep before, like make sure like when it comes to the realistic expectations, that you're not comparing yourself to other people. When you're going through any workshops, any hard parts, when you're going through anything on the platform, everybody comes in at different levels. And the reason why I mentioned that is because I think when I was in the boot camp, I think early on, I was really stressed out because I'm like, oh, I feel like I should be here, or I see so-and-so, I feel like they're at this level, like I'm not there yet, why not? And then you talk to them and you realize like, oh, they might have been doing this longer. Oh, they really like this specific technology, right? There's all different types of things that come into play that shapes, I guess where people are in their coding journey. So I would say just trying to keep a realistic expectation of like not comparing yourself to other people and coming into this in a sense of community, right? You're here to help one another. You're teaching people some things and they'll teach you some things. I think doing that will save you a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety as you're getting ready to go through the program.
Great advice. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so that is kind of some thoughts about prepping, getting ready to go into a program, breaking into tech. I want to also talk about some of the resources that Codesmith has within the hiring program. So as you think about how do I break into tech and then how do I get that first job? I know that's on a lot of people's minds because that's the actual point where you do the breaking in. So why don't we talk a bit about the hiring program? So I'm curious what resources or tools that Codesmith provided each of you or that you found yourself that have made an impact on how you're able to compete in today's tech job market. And Leah, if you don't mind, I'll go to you first and then Qwen after that.
So I'll answer this with an anecdote. When I finished Codesmith, we had our project and they brought in some companies so that we could show the project that we had worked on. And one of the companies was Boston Consulting Group, which I had never heard of, but is actually a really huge company. And so because of that presentation and because I went to talk to the person after the event was over, I was able to get an interview at that company. And at the time, it was one of the most insane office buildings I had ever seen because I hadn't been in the tech space yet. So I was like, you guys just live like this every day? Anyway, I did not get the role, but I did stay in contact with that person. And my point is, like, I was able to get my foot in the door to a company that was far out of like my imagination before Codesmith. And I went in there fairly confidently. And the anecdote is, later on, I started working for a company, and they were letting me know that they had come out of this other company where they build a bunch of apps, and sometimes those apps turn into their own company. And so the company that they came from was Boston Consulting Group. And a lot of the people that were there when I was interviewing were the people that I was working with at the new company. So I also think that, you know, that's to show that maybe I wasn't there right when I got out of boot camp, but I was able to get there eventually.
How about for you, Qwen? Any resources or tools that we provided or that you found on your own that made an impact on how you're able to compete in the market? Because you've had a couple of jobs. We didn't talk about that at your earlier part of your journey. So maybe you could tell people where you went straight after Codesmith and how you got to where you are now and what you leveraged to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So my first job out was at PayPal. I was there for a couple, 8 months, almost a year. And then from there, when I moved on from PayPal, I moved to the ed tech company. I was at GoGuardian for a little over a year. And now I'm in my third role as a software engineer at Smartcar. I think for me, honestly speaking, the hiring job searching portion of Codesmith was like the best part of the entire thing. I think you have all these skills, you have all these resources, now you're knowledgeable, you have the experience and the skill set, just like, okay, you can have that and not know how to market yourself. There are a bunch of other boot camps out there, and there are a bunch of other people, right? And we're all trying to get the same jobs at the end of the day. Like, that's just the reality, right? I think one thing, especially talking to other people, other boot camps, I think one thing I appreciated was like the resume workshopping. Even though I struggled with it so much, it was such a blessing. I would say that, and the mock interviews. And when I say mock interviews, it wasn't just like one and that was it. And it wasn't like, oh, we're gonna kind of do it. It was like something that I think Codesmith was very intentional about. And that was so beneficial that when it came to applying for jobs and interviewing, or going about, I guess, like trying to contact people and get in touch, you know, with recruiters, like the Codesmith way, I think that's one thing that really helped me. And I was actually surprised when I first tried it. I was like, there's no way some of what I learned here is actually going to work. I was like, I'll give it a try though. Like, I paid the money, you know, I've done everything else. Like, they haven't steered me wrong yet, so why not? And I was amazed at the results.
I love to hear that. It makes me chuckle over here on mute. But yeah, like I understand the healthy skepticism, but we definitely have put a lot of intentionality into, and now years of experience, right, into what we're doing. But then we're also, again, very focused. I don't mean this to be salesy. It is what it is. We are also always changing and looking at what can we do differently? What can we do to improve upon it? What can we do to make sure that our residents have the best outcomes? How can we support them to get to that point? We don't do it. The residents do it. We give them the tools and then they go and execute. And that is what has proven to be so successful. Okay, so I do have a question about, did either of you, and I guess Qwen, you did go back into your previous industry in a tech role, right, to get into ed tech, but we have alumni from all kinds of backgrounds, right? We have people who are in the entertainment space. You have nurses, we have IT folks, we've got marketers, we've got everybody who kind of comes in, but they have this kind of similar interest in tech, right? In coding, in software engineering. Leah, did you ever consider re-entering your previous industry in a technical role?
So yes, when I first came out of boot camp, I was very anxious. And so I wanted things to happen really quickly. Knowing what I know now, I could have probably relaxed a little bit, but one thing that I realized is like, okay, I do have this background in film, and I know that I'm decent at it. And I think I can be a good coder somewhere if I'm given the opportunity. So my very first role out of boot camp was actually at Pepperdine in a role called web producer. And so what I was able to do there was, I could easily deliver the videography that they wanted, but my main focus was making their student portal, their student websites amazing, and just really happy with the technology that was going there. And literally everything that has happened has built off of that one decision.
Love that. It's that foot in the door, like y'all talked about already. Getting that first role is so impactful to everything else because you have an opportunity to prove yourself, and then you can kind of run from there and check out different industries based on your interests, which is great. So that actually leads me, nice segue, leads me into my next set of questions about excelling in a competitive tech market, right? So once you've gotten your foot in the door, you've made the decision, once you've gotten that first job, how do you make sure you stay relevant? So Qwen, how do you stay motivated, productive, and keep up with the latest trends and demands in the software engineering job market? What tips would you share, and what are you reading?
Yeah, for me, it's mainly, I feel like the way that works for me is mainly newsletters and just kind of like surfing Twitter. They are a bunch of people on Twitter that you can follow that are always talking about all things tech, all things JavaScript, all things, anything you can think of. So following those people, like the practical engineer, or pragmatic engineer, I think is on Twitter. That's a really good thread. It's an engineering manager that has all these years of experience, and he literally just talks about anything and everything around software engineering all day long, and that's great. The other thing, there's two newsletters I follow. I wrote them down. I think one is called bytes.dev. It's a newsletter, which is pretty cool. It tells you like anything coming new around JavaScript. They always include like a quiz, like a little question and an answer as you scroll down, and any new like products and services that you can use as a developer, especially free ones and ones that are new on the market that can help you be a better developer and building things. Those are the things I typically try to do and try to look at.
Awesome, thank you. And then Leah, I mean, both of you have worked at several companies and a variety of jobs, but how do all of them differ? Can you, for the group here, when they're looking at tech job descriptions, what does it mean to be a full stack engineer versus a front end or back end engineer, software engineer, lead engineer? Can you talk to us about those titles?
Sure. So the first thing to know is what's the front end and what's the back end. So the front end is literally anything that the user is interacting with to manipulate data. And I say it that way because a lot of people first describe it as visual. And this is true, but I would think of it more as what your end user is interacting with, because like say you were making something that is for a hardware, right? It might not have the same like web soft corners and like borders, but it's still something that the end user is interacting with. So that's the front end. The back end is really what allows you to store and access data, or to request and respond with data at its core. But you can kind of think of that as all the stuff that happens on the server. And just so for more of a realistic view, if you're talking about the front end, that would be, the website that you're actually going to, where you're putting in your name and interacting with. And the back end would be the server that website is communicating with. So if someone says they're a front end engineer, that means that most likely about 90% of their work is focused solely on the front end. So they're going to be doing things in React, Vue, Angular, that kind of world. And then if someone says they're a back-end engineer, that means they're doing things that are solely on the back end. So they're going to be using things more like Node, Java, .NET. And then you have very special people that say, hey, I'm full stack. And So that means that they do both. And then just quickly, like the difference between a lead and a regular SWE, which is a term for software engineer, SWE, is a level up after you go through being an individual contributor. You'll see that as an IC in a lot of places where you'll read. And so it essentially means that they're moving into more of middle management here in software. On the flip side of a lead, which is more of a manager position, there's also roles like software architect or principal engineer. And so when you're starting to hear those titles, it's not that the job is changing, it's just that the responsibilities are changing, if that makes sense.
I think it does. Thank you so much. All right, so thank you very much for all of that. We've kind of worked through our journey, right, of coming into thinking about tech, breaking into tech, and then how do you stay successful in tech and what does that look like? I'm going to open up the chat for Q&A. I know that there are some questions in there already, so Samantha or Caitlin, if you want to, I can go back, but if you have them easy, you can drop them in for me and then we can ask that question and get them answered for everyone. And if you have any questions, please do drop them in the chat as well.
Jennifer asked about managing imposter syndrome.
Okay, cool.
So,
perfect, thank you. So can you talk a little bit about how you experienced imposter syndrome going in and how you managed it?
So imposter syndrome is real, and it usually comes from two places. One, it comes from not knowing, and two, it comes from being put in a new situation and questioning if you have the ability to deliver. And so the second one is actually the hardest one to conquer. The not knowing portion, if in your heart you're thinking, I don't know this, then that's an indication that you should probably learn it. And that's an easy one to solve. The belief in yourself takes time. And for me, it came with confidence. And I got confidence as I learned more. But you can't get to that point unless you start. So whenever you're kind of in your mind saying like, I don't know enough to be here, it's like, well, you can't get to the next step unless you're where you are right now. So embrace that a little bit. It does not always feel great, but know that, you've already done really amazing things. You've taken the first step to say, I want to be an engineer, and you're here right now. You're going to go to a boot camp and there are going to be challenges, but you're going to get through that too. So there's nothing that should be in your mind that's saying that I can't make it to the next step. So really try to look on what your current goal is and take it one step at a time.
Awesome, thank you. Qwen, do you have any thoughts about imposter syndrome to add to that?
Yeah, I would say one thing that I've learned and it's helped me to kind of overcome it. I know when you have imposter syndrome and you're scared, you feel like an imposter, like, hey, am I here? Am I good enough? You're afraid to kind of ask for help, and you're afraid to ask questions because of how you're perceived. I've learned to work through that by, again, when you find your network and you find your community, there are people you're going to feel comfortable going to no matter what. So establishing that and building a rapport and support system is very important. The other thing I would say is there are things out there that people make assumptions about when it comes to other people and their skill sets. And I would try to stay away from doing that. I think when I was going through my Immersive program, somebody shared a blog post by Dan Abramoff. I think that's how you say his name. He's a person that created Redux. And pretty much he seemed to as like this cool person, that works in tech, that's done something that's impacted so many people. But in his blog, he actually wrote about all the things he doesn't know about. And that's something you could just like very quickly look up. And I think he put something out every year, if I'm not mistaken. And it was just interesting to read because it's like this person that like, he works at Facebook, he created this thing off a programming pattern that literally thousands of people use on a daily basis. You know, it's like almost the norm, you know, depending on what you're working in. But to see him put out a blog post and to reel off things he doesn't know, and some of those things I was like, that seems like very easy, you know, like that seems like very straightforward, you know. But for him, he was like, I never touched it. It doesn't make sense to me, but I don't need to learn it right now. I might not need to use it for what I'm working on. I think like finding things like that, I think are really important and helping to bring you back in and to work through that imposter syndrome.
Excellent. Thank you. We're going to answer the question that Delilah posted in the chat, then I'll go to you, Meredith, and then we'll see some other questions in the chat. So Delilah asks us, do you all have any comments? And Qwen, I'll actually direct this at you about the current tech recession. I'm nervous that now's not a good time to become a SWE because folks are having a harder time finding it harder to get jobs. So you just got a new job recently, like you shared with us. So can you talk to us a bit about that? Any comments on the tech recession?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the tech recession is real. I think it's one of those things that people aren't getting hired as quickly as sometimes in the past couple months ago when it came to the hiring, like a little after COVID, I would say. I would say now is still a good time. And I truly think any time is really a good time. The reason why I say that, and it goes back to kind of getting your foot in the door. When I got my foot in the door for my first company, there's so many companies and so many products and things being built, there's always a need for software engineers. So with that being said, as soon as I got my foot in the door, I noticed right away, I'm constantly getting LinkedIn recruiters in my inbox, just asking me, hey, are you interested? Hey, are you interested? And if I'm not, of course, I try to forward them off and refer them to other people. But it's just one of those things where like, yes, you're definitely going to still have to go out and apply, and you're going to have to like do some groundwork. But I think, in my perspective, it's been easier for me to find jobs after getting that first role in tech, and really learning and honing my skills and being there for a while. Because now people are saying, okay, well, this company hires you. You know, if this company sees you, you know, you have this expertise, and we can see in your resume the cool things you've done there, then, you know, why not go into the next thing? And I actually recently was laid off in January. And before starting to actually job search, I decided to take a month and a half off and kind of take a break. But during that month off, recruiters were reaching out to me, and they were like, hey, are you job searching? Hey, are you interested? And even then, like reaching out to other companies using like the Codesmith way and kind of using the resources they taught me was super helpful, because when I reached out to the few companies that I did, I felt like I was able to be much more selective, and I felt like they were responding to me when it came to reaching out and trying to find a new role moving forward.
Awesome, thank you. Leah, if you have something to add, I'm happy to have you unmute. Otherwise, we'll go straight to Meredith. Okay, Meredith, why don't you unmute or can she unmute?
I think so.
Perfect.
Hi. So my question is for Leah or Qwen or both of you. When you mentioned that when you got your foot in the door, you know, then a lot more opportunities came up. And Leah, you had mentioned how talking with Boston Consulting Group and interviewing right after, like you had felt like, or you wondered if maybe you weren't quite ready at that time and that there was still some learning to do. And so I was just curious, like, what's that time like between last day of boot camp and the day you start your first job? Like, is it all like applying for jobs every day? Are you trying to do like contract work? Like, what is that time kind of like until you get that first role?
Something that I think is important is every job market is slightly different. So staying attuned to like what the job market is doing and what roles are most wanted, like is important. And also during the job market, being realistic about the price that you're asking for, and all of that I think is important. But outside of that, I think continuing to apply. Also, the mock interviews are amazing, but nothing is going to teach you as much as a real interview. And so every time you get an interview, you know, that's a lesson. And so I would go into those interviews, especially when you're right out of boot camp, as not, oh, I'm in an interview, so that means I have to get a job. But heck yeah, I got an interview. How much can I learn from this? And, you know, interviewing is a skill in and of itself. Outside of that, though, like the things we've been talking about, networking, just getting to know other engineers, open source projects, reading through them, contributing if you can, but also just staying aware of the landscape. So, you know, if React is the big thing right now, and this is more of once you're out of boot camp, start thinking about, well, are there any new things happening in the React ecosystem that I should learn and that can give me a leg up? Or are there even other things like, you know, and React is still number one, just statistically, but hypothetically, are there other things that could take React's place, like Vue or Angular, and should I learn those?
So Matt asks, how do you find the best open source projects to contribute to?
A great start is the tools that you use. So, you know, if you are using React, but not just React, right? There are even like building tools that you'll end up probably using, Webpack. I don't want to just start listing off technologies because that's not the point, but there's going to be tools that you have to use on your day-to-day. So contributing to those is always awesome, but also looking for things that interest you. So I saw someone ask a question about AI. So if you know JavaScript, are there any new AI libraries that are written in JavaScript? And if so, that might be something you're interested in contributing to. Also, I'm sure most of you are familiar with GitHub, but they have really cool ways where you can kind of set up your feed to only see the things that you're interested in seeing. So, you know, set up your GitHub feed so you can start seeing new projects. You can start following certain developers through GitHub, because it's also a social platform as well.
Great, thank you. And we'll do, the last question is, Aaliyah or Elia, can we talk about the rise of AI and how it is or is not affecting software engineering? So feels like now people have to be more advanced than say a couple of years ago to get a good job because AI can write basic code. And so any thoughts on that? So maybe it's just a beginner thing, Elia says, but or Leah says, but I keep feeling like I'm competing with AI. So any perspective on that at this point? How do you all see it affecting what you're doing now?
I think it will in the future in some way. I don't know what that looks like. I think for right now, I think there's a lot of buzz around AI. And I think there's a lot of like push in the industry for it. And I see like companies talking about how they're going to incorporate it. But I don't think it's at the point yet where, like, at least in my opinion, that's something to be worried about. I think at the end of the day, we are software engineers, we have the skill set. And hopefully, I think what I'm hoping for in the future is that we can use AI in addition to the skill set that we have to continue to build out products, just to be much more efficient and much more productive. But that's kind of a hard one because it's all, in my opinion, is all still fairly new. So there's a lot of guesses on what it's going to look like for the future. But I don't see that as, I don't see it yet as I would say like a threat is what I think people feel when it comes to the job market and what we're kind of seeing right now. I don't know. Do you have anything there?
So I think AI in general can pose an existential threat if it gets powerful enough. But I think the biggest threat right now is humans and how they use it. And so there are a lot of companies and their employees, well, that have been using AI for a long time. Business analysts could tell you that, but using it in a mass marketed type of way, like it is being reintroduced now, is new. And so right now, a lot of companies are facing legal issues where if they use AI in their code, are they using someone else's code? Or are they introducing security risks into the app? I mention that because it's important to realize that just because it's not being used now doesn't mean it won't be used, because people are also actively trying to answer those questions, and there is a want to start to integrate it. So I'm not saying this is like a Codesmith sanctioned, but I would start trying to integrate it into your patterns sooner rather than later. I would take a look into what prompt engineering is, if you haven't already, and to understand how to create more complex prompts in the realm of the AI bot. But what this really goes to is learning, right? What I'm really trying to say is this is a new tool, and just like all the other tools that you have to learn and keep abreast of, this is just like that, except it's most likely going to be a really important tool. So I'd say if you can get a head start, why not?
And I think to your point about the human aspect of it is there's a lot that's kind of a question mark right now. And I think there's going to be so much, there's so much importance on humans and how they show up, right? Like, how are the humans creating what the AI is doing, right? So it's going to be even more necessary for ethical engineers. It's going to be even more necessary for engineers who know how to work with other people and consider other people, because they are the ones behind all of the AI, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot that's still a question mark, but I think there's so much opportunity still. We're going to end it at that because I know I value everyone's time, and I know that we are over by a little bit here. So thank you so much to Qwen and Leah. So if we do a lot of silent clapping at Codesmith. So so just thank you both for your time and for your insights and for your advice.